Okay, so go ahead, Cassio.
Awesome. So welcome everybody. We're super excited to have Landon and Vincas today here to talk to us about attack surface monitoring techniques in the OWASP top 10. But before we start the regular announcements, I have one to make. And for the last 1 year, I've been the leader for the OWASP Los Angeles. And I was very fortunate to work with our wonderful board to help us keep the chapter afloat. Not only afloat, but really striving during this 1 year that was very difficult due to COVID and other shortcomings that we had to be all virtual. And after this year, I made a hard decision to actually step down. But I do have some good news. And the good news is that Richard Greenberg, who used to be our leader before, is actually returning, and the board unanimously approved Richard to become the new leader for OWASP Los Angeles. So I just wanted to say thanks to this amazing board. You guys did a lot of hard work to make every single meeting run smoothly every single month. We grew quite a lot, the number of people in our chapter. And without further ado, I welcome Richard back and wish the very best for OWASP Los Angeles.
All right, thank you, Cassio. Don't see him on the call today, but hopefully next month we'll have that introduction formally and welcome him back to the board. I'm going to go through the slide presentation that I have, talking a little bit about the OWASP Los Angeles, and then I'll hand the meeting off to Landon and Vincas to do their presentation. So just quickly, today we have the meeting about the role of attack surface monitoring techniques in the OWASP top 10. I'll go and hopefully this presentation will start. All right, so as Cassio mentioned, he's stepping down as our leader. So we have a great appreciation for the work that he's done, as well as Lilia, who's also leaving the board. So we have managed for the past year to run all of the meetings on time. All the recordings are available, and we had great speakers, which most of them were sourced by Cassio himself. So thank you, Cassio, for a great job. The new board is trimmed down to 5 people, and Richard is joining back as our leader, and the rest of the team is here. They're doing a phenomenal job in running and maintaining this chapter. We're hoping that in coming months, as the COVID dies down, we'll be able to go back to in-person meetings. But for now, we're going to continue the virtual meetings that we have. I'm going to play the standard OWASP introduction video, so bear with us while it plays. Thank you.
It's a nonprofit that stands for the Open Web Application Security Project. OWASP is a community of developers, technologists, and evangelists improving the security of software through tools and resources. OWASP has 100+ active projects, and new project applications are submitted weekly. Projects are open source and are built by our community of volunteers, people just like you. Community and networking. There are hundreds of local chapters worldwide and thousands of members. Meetings are free and open to everyone. They include training, talks, and networking opportunities. Education and training. OWASP hosts many events each year. They are a great way to improve your skills, build your professional network, and learn about new trends in the industry. One of the many ways you can get involved is to become a member. The membership benefits include discounts for events and trainings, your own OWASP email address and Google Workspace access, a vote in our OWASP Global Board elections. And recently, OWASP added a brand new member benefit, access to hands-on application security training through the OWASP Secure Flag Open Platform. Join us and become a member today.
Okay, so that's a little bit about the OWASP and its purpose and its mission. These are the social media venues that we frequently post to, but the most important one is the YouTube channel that we have, that all the recordings for these monthly meetings are posted there. So please subscribe to the channel. It helps us get the word out more frequently. As the video mentioned, this is a little bit more detail about the benefits of the membership. To start, I would like to encourage everyone that is in the AppSec or in security industry, please sign up and be a member of OWASP Foundation. Your money goes to a really good cause. If you are a student, it's $20 a year, and if not, it's $50 a year. So a fairly reasonable money for the benefits you're getting. The slide shows some of the ongoing benefits that you can get from the membership, but please explore the other benefits that are on the website, owasp.org. If you would like to sponsor, if you're a vendor and you'd like to sponsor the chapter, that's the email that you can contact us, and we'll get in touch with you to go for the rest of the arrangement and how to move forward with the partnership that would benefit both you and our local chapter, and ultimately the OWASP Foundation. We currently have on our Meetup channel over 2,400 members. Next month, we don't yet have a speaker, but we'll definitely have one, so stay tuned for that. If you know of a good speaker, please reach out to us and do the introduction, and we'll get in touch with them to schedule them for one of the upcoming monthly meetings. And without further ado, Landon and Vincas, welcome, and please take it up.
Very much. Thank you, Edmund. Vincas, you want to share the slides? Super. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me okay? Edmund, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Super. So thank you very much for letting us present today. Casio gave us this opportunity a couple months ago, and we were thrilled to really kind of talk through attack surface monitoring techniques and really how they apply to application security, and most specifically, the OWASP top 10. So again, thank you very much for letting us present today. My background, I'm one of the co-founders and vice presidents. I started Nisos in 2015 with Justin Zeef and the help of Vincas Ciziunas. My background, I was a former technical targeting officer with the intelligence community, ultimately helping to do computer network exploitation against not only nation states, and certainly not just, and that doesn't just mean computer network exploitation and doing remote code execution type investigations, but really just a lot of different open source intelligence techniques and tradecraft, and that's what we wanted to start the company with. Vincas, would you like to give a little background about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Vincas Ciziunas. I have been in the information security industry for over 20 years. I started out just before the first .com bubble burst at Counterpane, and then the bubble burst, and that sent me working towards at government companies and or government contracting, and I bounced in and out of government and private sector work doing security, both planning for and defending against attacks.
So when we think about, just keep on the slide for a minute, Vincas, but when we think about, probably worthwhile to have 30 seconds of what we look at when we look at open source intelligence. A lot of people probably think open source intelligence is the aggregation of social media and data breaches. That's certainly a part of it. We go and think about that a little bit more broadly. We look at director threat actor engagement, and really specific to this discussion here, we really get into the technical signature analysis. And that's kind of what, if we move to the next slide, that is what we'll kind of to discuss when we talk about attack surface monitoring. I think this is certainly a crowd that, and certainly an audience, is very passionate about application security. And this is really just, and that's kind of goes from that move left to move right on the MITRE attack framework. This is going to really get into really that reconnaissance phase and using different types of telemetry to focus not only on controls, but really how to what can you do from an intelligence gain as well. And really, we're talking about the data sets like passive DNS. We're talking about NetFlow, and we're really talking about different types of ad tech data. And of course, Vincas will give a lot of different examples regarding that. So when we talk about attack surface monitoring tools and basics, you can go to the next slide. When we talk about what the market problem of what is kind of encompassed with regard to attack surface monitoring, a lot of people know it's shadow IT. This is, when security teams are alerted to different types of infrastructure. I'm sure everybody's familiar with marketing teams that stand up marketing websites, somebody in IT standing up a DevOps server, and don't clear this through security. And then, of course, they're alerted when there's usually a problem sometimes. When we talk about cloud misconfigurations, there's no shortage of different permissions and different access that can be allowed inadvertently with Azure, GCP, or AWS. And a lot of this kind of falls around the bucket of vulnerability exposure. And I think what we want to really kind of drive home in this presentation is, a lot of people are very familiar with vulnerability management. Application security often feeds a part of vulnerability management. Vulnerability management, a lot of times, there's no shortage of scanners that tells you what is vulnerable. This presentation hopefully will give you a sense of what is actually happening, right? So looking at different types of telemetry to say what is actually happening to ultimately to augment vulnerability management programs, as well as application security programs. And certainly the last bullet point here around unactionable risk ratings. There's certainly a lot of different vendors that provide an aggregation of different types of telemetry to feed risk ratings. What we've often seen is those risk ratings often don't exactly translate necessarily to actual business risk, right? There's another level of analysis that's really needed to business risk. And as just an example on that same, looking at that marketing website that stood up, is that a marketing website that actually it has credentials? Does it have customer data? A lot of times these risk ratings kind of won't provide that. So if we kind of go to the next slide and look at the different, so what is exactly available outside the firewall, and what is necessary for enterprises to protect. And go to the next slide. And so this is ultimately kind of what we're talking about, all the different data that exists outside of a perimeter that enterprise is responsible for protecting. And this is what gets abused, a lot of times at that reconnaissance stage. And there's a lot of intel providers that think intelligence is providing this type of data. But as we know, data is not intelligence. And what we will walk through is how we use this telemetry to really drive answers to what a problem is, and really have some techniques that can be useful for different types of investigations. And speaking of answers and intelligence gain, I'll turn it over to Vincas.
So ASM data use in the OWASP top 10. Like Landon said, you can fire off scanners all day, but what you're left with is a bunch of garbage data. So, or what you might be left with a bunch of garbage data, because there's a lot of data that you can, that may be irrelevant. So we're gonna look at ways to utilize passive data to allow you to identify the stuff being exploited as it's being exploited, or as it could potentially be exploited. We're going to look at the top 10 for 2021. OWASP has identified these as the top 10 issues uncovered in application security tests. Those are just point in time. Just because your app test doesn't uncover these in your applications doesn't mean they're not there. That's where ASM comes in for the assist. We spend millions of dollars to aggregate the stuff on the left column. Attack surface monitoring includes, corporate network domain discovery, all these other things here. And the tools that we might use include net blocks and domains. We use geolocation services. We look at host names and subdomains. We look at certs and services using NetFlow and Shodan and those types of services. We look at devices and hosts and infections using NetFlow and gray hat warfare. We look at unsanctioned technology using NetFlow, and we identify other ports and VPNs and other things, anomalous traffic use, again, using NetFlow, Shodan, gray hat warfare, etc. How can adversaries use ASM data and techniques for intelligence collection? Well, example number one was OWASP number one, broken access control. You can identify evidence of broken access control by looking at patterns of directory structures and real web traffic in the web archive. You can Google dork, your site and index of. People leave behind log files and original versions of images containing location identifying information. Sometimes you can access sensitive customer URLs not intended for public consumption by looking at that. Example number, OWASP number 2, cryptographic failures. Shodan will show older versions of SSL spec used and permitted. That might get identified in an assessment, but what happens if you schedule an assessment and some of the people working on your system decide to turn off the old technology and then turn it back on again when the assessment's done. You'll be able to identify lapses in such situations when they turn things back on, and those things appear in Shodan and NetFlow. NetFlow providers will show regular use of non-secure technologies such as FTP and HTTP. Your developers might say that they're not using FTP, but this will show actual use of as opposed to the assessment view of things. The URL and website archives like the Wayback Machine again, and NetFlow providers will be able to show any PII or passwords exposed in, or at least help you identify PII or passwords that might be exposed in URLs. It might be encoded. If you can get fully man in the middle, you can break and force decrypt sessions for clients. Sometimes you just need to identify places where the weakness is there. Direct access to the data on the wire that is, the NetFlow gives us direct access to data on the wire that's in the past has only been available with government eavesdropping efforts. OWASP number 3 for 2021 is injection. NetFlow frequently shows can show frequency of attempted injections. You can watch, at least in some situations, you can watch injection attempts occur live and then identify situations where they may have succeeded because you see the traffic going out based on, if it's an injection to inject execution. Cookies are sometimes visible in NetFlow data, and those can be analyzed and decoded without touching infrastructure. You can watch successes and failures, like I said. Cookies observed in the NetFlow stuff can show us how attempts are built. Are the cookies on a web page built in a secure fashion? You can also observe whether the entities attempting injection are targeting just one customer or numerous customers' infrastructure. So if you notice somebody hitting your infrastructure and attempting injection, even if you don't see it in NetFlow, if you see it in logs and your logging is good, or if you have to depend on NetFlow because your logging is poor, which shouldn't be, but you can then look at the attacker IP address in NetFlow and see if they are specifically targeting you, or if you're just you just happen to be somebody that they're just randomly scanning. Number 4, insecure design. Again, you can look at the Wayback Machine and identify URL patterns that might give you indications of poor design. In this case, I'm looking at a website that that the Web Archive has collected order IDs. You can also potentially walk back customer IDs in this way, but the order IDs can provide inventory for a brick and mortar retail establishment. Frequently, you can see how many, you can possibly enumerate some of these, browse some of these URLs and see the data that might be exposed. In other cases, you might just get the number of orders that occur. I don't know if anyone's seen the recent the Batman movie. At the end of the Batman movie, at the end of the credits, there was a URL for this radalada.com that led to this website hypothetically developed by the Riddler. And it was basically a quiz website. You had to break the Riddler's riddles and to find out what they were gaming for. Scammers can game these marketing gimmicks that in some cases end up resulting in prizes that are won, actual monetary prizes. And they can the developers may have accidentally ended up having their site recorded by the web archive, or they can appear in NetFlow. In this case, you could look up in NetFlow the URLs that were browsed, and these JPEGs are actually the solutions to the riddles that were presented on the site. So if this Riddler website was a monetary thing, that would immediately expose prizes and help someone rig the system. Security misconfiguration. People leave cloud shared drive data open a lot. Host websites, people host websites on S3 buckets and Google Drive. Netlify is becoming a very popular way of hosting your sites on things like Google Drive and GitHub, which might, if those sources are misconfigured, they might leave them readable to the world. Gray Hat Warfare is a search engine that exists that might allow you to search for those types of drives that are wide open. This is the result of a search for OWASP, and apparently somebody here has left their OWASP course materials available for download. Further on example number 5, security misconfigurations. Everyone here is probably familiar with robots.txt. But one thing that robots.txt does not do is, it tells crawlers to not, it can tell crawlers to allow or disallow crawlers to record certain website URLs. Puts sitemap, allows you to list out a sitemap that might exist. One of the things that it is not there for is for security. Hackers can use this for open source targeting data. They will look through all of the things that are disallowed and start looking at those URLs exclusively to see if, because they'll identify, hey, this is where all the interesting stuff is. Sometimes the sitemaps can contain a complete listing of products to make it easier to crawl product data that could enable a someone looking to monitor, like a short seller might be interested in monitoring the sales data of all the inventory at a retail establishment. They could use this to identify if the sitemap gives away all of the product IDs. They don't have to try to actually brute force crawl a site. They can just grab the sitemaps and walk those in order to get the data. One of the more interesting things that I have run into in a situation like this before has been, I ran into somebody had a disallow/log in robots.txt, and I browsed straight to there, and there were log files and configuration settings and SSH keys that were just left open. Don't do that. Number 5, security misconfigurations. Shodan and Binary Edge and similar products will allow you to search for ports that are open and database services that are open that shouldn't be. In this case, we've found a computer in Russia that has RDP open, appears to be on a FSB domain. How timely. We've run into situations where companies and NGOs and government organizations have left systems exposed to the like this to the internet. It included backend databases. It included systems that had RDP open. And then when you punch that IP address that you've identified, which you wouldn't have known belonged to that organization, but you punch that into NetFlow, and you can watch the sites that those hosts VPN into, and then you've identified more infrastructure that might not be publicly known, that may not have even appeared in the assessment because they weren't, maybe they weren't provided by the by you when you had somebody do an assessment, or you may not have known because it's infrastructure that's in use when it's in production, but not in in evaluation stages. You might be able to. I've had customers that have exposed their, like I said, their databases with their website backends. I've had them. There was a person who left RDP open, a vulnerable RDP instance, and he was VPN'd in and basically exposed the entire back end of the production web network to the internet just by having that exposed, because he didn't want to. He wanted to be able to access his the production infrastructure from his house, and this happens even between assessments. Number 6, vulnerable and outdated components. Recently, things like default installations of WordPress will take your email address. They will hash it and use it as an ID for an account, for an avatar thing that is sometimes associated with Gravatar. Even if you don't have a Gravatar account, it will take your login email address, make an MD5 out of it, and associate that with your icon on the WordPress site. That can then be used to associate you with with your mobile device. There's all sorts of mobile device data that can be used to track your movement in that regard. Site web archive and NetFlow URL will show indications of older software use. Readme.txt files left behind that are open that will tell you that, hey, I'm running an old version of Joomla. Default configurations of WordPress that leave WP content uploads open, that for some strange reason, I more often than not find people using as a file share because they feel like that's what it's there for, and they'll leave configuration files in those directories, even though WordPress, hosts uploaded files to it. It's hilarious. Number 7, identification and authentication failures. We can actively see what cookies are being used in Web Archive and NetFlow data that show session identifiers given away. If you use HTTP on your site, your cookies, your data is not safe. We can take all the cookies that we see going across on HTTP and do statistical, we don't have to try to create logins. We can just sit there and collect those cookies and see if they're, do a statistical analysis of the cookie and see if it's poorly designed, see if it's extractable. One of the most interesting cookie failures I've ever seen was someone just made a JSON with the ID data of the user, gzipped it, moved the first 4 bytes of the gzip header to the end, and then MD5 or then base64 encoded that, and that was the cookie. With enough data, you can figure that out, and you can hex dump the binary that results and see that it's a gzip file. And you could just rewrite the cookie and become that user. And by monitoring the cookies that go across on the wire there, we could become any of those users. Number 8, software and data integrity failures. Again, using NetFlow, we can observe some of your infrastructure contacting update servers. Things like, did you know that that something on your production infrastructure is calling out to AnyDesk for updates, or calling out to Zotero. I've got a listing here of all the update servers that some infrastructure is calling back to. Are there Fortinet devices? Recent Fortinet vulnerabilities. The technologies that your infrastructure people and have insisted are not in there, and you can see evidence of those occurring in that backend infrastructure, just looking at NetFlow data. 9, security logging and monitoring failures. The amount of data that goes in and out of, so you can look for the amount of data that goes in and out of enterprise servers. You can look for evidence of infrastructure calling out to places like Mega or Dropbox, things that they shouldn't be sending gigs of data to. You can actually see a website that should not be sending massive amounts of data outbound, sending massive, your infrastructure might be telling you that your inbound traffic is your, the higher amount of traffic, and the passive NetFlow data that we might have access to might actually be able to tell you that no, your monitoring infrastructure is wrong. Now, the truth may be somewhere in the middle, but at least you'll see that there's evidence that something is not quite right. It'll, and this is between assessments. You'd be able to, monitor and observe to make sure that what you think things should be is what they actually are. Server-side request forgery, number 10. NetFlow can show requests inbound to internal IP addresses. In combination with situations where you've got DNS leaks of internal infrastructure, you can kind of compare that to, is someone actually performing a GET request for internal infrastructure that they shouldn't? Are they getting a lot of data back? You can, watch those things occur that shouldn't be occurring. Key takeaways. This will give you a more passive look at what's of infrastructure. Instead of looking at what's possible, looking at traditional vulnerability management, we focus on what's happening. You look at the ground truth of what's observable in passive data. More than just attacks, you can see leaks that occur without even touching the infrastructure. Early on in the company, we were involved in a situation where someone had all of their retail endpoints suddenly drop off of their VPN, and basically the VPN dropped out, and it was a company that had just gotten acquired, and the guys at the acquired company were saying that they'd seen evidence of Chinese attacks. They had deleted all the logging, or someone had deleted, the attacker had deleted all the logging in AWS. eventually we got some of that logging back just by requesting it of AWS. But this was back when we were doing more IR type things. But we had access to NetFlow, and we were able to observe anomalous behavior. We identified around the time that the events occurred that there were connections to some infrastructure that the company didn't know about around the time that the systems got their VPN firewalls got wiped, and we were able to track back that the people that had attacked the network, the Chinese people supposedly that had attacked the network, had in fact been insiders who were angry and bitter. And that kind of led us, NetFlow, looking at actual data led us to identify a situation that could have been worse. That kind of led us to wanting to do this on a more active, identify the anomalous behavior before it becomes that problem where all of your data gets deleted or all your accesses get disconnected. It's intelligence gains for yourselves rather than your adversaries, competitors, or the stock shorter. Any questions?
Thank you. If anyone has a question, you can either type it in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. I think one of the first question was, can we get a copy of the slides?
Hey, it's Gary. So I have a question about some of the websites where you can't really configure MFA, like Vincas was mentioning about the AWS, but you can implement an MFA solution or maybe an OTP where you can verify if it's you or not. And that can be helpful to stop people who are trying to use a brute force system to get into the account. What about other systems where the platform doesn't give you the ability to use something other than the password to verify, or I should say maybe to authenticate the user?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah.
What,
so
what about MF?
Gary, maybe speak up because you're coming.
I think on AWS, one can use the MFA system to verify if it's them using the Authenticator app or maybe the OTP and the one-time password. But what about some of the websites where you can't really verify by using some of the new technologies that we have, like MFA or OTPs, to authorize or to authenticate?
Yeah, it's they are generally good. Yeah, not good unless it's Okta. No, I do encourage the use of various MFA solutions. You can still identify which MFA solution is in use. So in the case of you can watch that, I can look at your infrastructure and identify that you're using Okta, because it might, there may be references to Okta passively. And if, given recent events, which MFA solution you might be using might be identifiable, and an attacker might be interested in that. I don't know if that answers any question.
Yeah, thanks, I got it.
Landon or Vincas, there was a question whether the slides would be available after the call.
Could we run a Saturday? Yeah, we could consider running a Saturday class on some of the tools. That sounds like an interesting thought. What do you think, Landon?
Certainly happy to. We'll certainly talk after this. Ping us, and we're happy to kind of walk through it. In terms of the slides, absolutely. I think this will be on YouTube, I believe, but certainly happy to share the slides as well. Come on, Robin. I know you have some questions. You see that Vincas Robin asked, should companies block access to Shodan?
That's a tough question, because if people start blocking access to Shodan, you're going to end up having people, or even question it could be extended to, should people block access to the web archive? Should people block access to Google? I mean, that was like back in the 90s. Everyone was like, we need to block access to Alta Vista because I don't want them, documenting my site. You could start blocking them, but then someone else is going to pop up, and there's always going to be another, or Shodan's going to figure out how to not look like Shodan. Yeah, you're better off using that data to your advantage, and searching for your infrastructure to see if anything pops up there, because that data does go away. They if it's not current, the data does go away and it does disappear. So if you're the first person to find, someone's plugged their laptop that's VPN'd into your back network, directly into their Google Fi line, and is both on the VPN and sharing movies via BitTorrent, you're better off finding that out by notice, being the one to respond to it. Any other questions? Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Vincas or Landon? Okay. Well, there's still time, but if there are no questions, and I don't see anything typed up in the chat box either. Okay, I'm going to take the screen sharing back. And with that, if there are no further questions, we thank Landon and Vincas very much for presenting today. This was very interesting. The recording would be on YouTube within a few days. And I don't know the arrangement for the slides. If they sent me the slides, I can include a link in the notes in the YouTube, or you guys can go and add the notes in there yourself. Vincas or Landon, whichever you can. And again, thanks very much for everybody that joined us today, either through this meetup or a Zoom meeting, or through the conference down in Orange County. And we will announce the next speaker within the next few weeks as soon as we have one. And with that, have a great rest of your days, and see you next time.
And thank you to Casio for allowing us to speak. Appreciate it. Thank you, Edmund, as well.
You're welcome. See you guys next. Bye.